December 1944. The Ardennes forest lay under a sheet of snow so bright it blinded the eyes at dawn. To the German officers stationed along the Siegfried Line, it was the perfect symbol of their confidence, clean, silent absolute. They believed winter itself would fight on their side, freezing the Allied wounded before the medics could reach them. In every report sent to Berlin, one phrase repeated like a chant: the Americans have machines, but they bleed like children. Captain Dieter Haas of the Wehrmacht's Medical Corps kept a journal. He had seen the carnage from both sides, but what fascinated him most was not courage or strategy. It was logistics. You can measure the strength of an army, he wrote, by how quickly its wounded die. He believed the Allies, for all their tanks and planes, would lose because they could not keep their soldiers alive once they were hit. His field reports detailed the enemy's weakness with surgical precision: no mobile transfusion units, blood stored in glass jars, frozen by morning, supply lines collapse in snow. Haas smiled as he sealed the envelope with the official stamp. The war, he thought, still obeyed the old mathematics of suffering. In the ruins of Bastogne, German observers watched American medics dragging stretchers through the mud, their breath rising in white plumes, their hands raw from cold. The wounded screamed for morphine, for warmth, for blood, the one thing no one could give them fast enough. Inside, the shattered churches turned into aid stations. The smell was unbearable. Wet uniforms, diesel smoke iron, and rot. The blood stored in bottles cracked like ice. When a soldier died, the medics would place his tag on a nail hammered into the wall. Nails covered every beam. Radio intercepts confirmed the pattern. American casualties who might have survived in summer were dying within hours in winter. Their supply depots could not keep up. Their field hospitals overflowed. For the Germans, it was proof of superiority, proof that technology could not replace discipline. They fight with gadgets, one colonel said, over schnapps. We fight with endurance. The laughter that followed was confident, almost cruel. But somewhere behind those lines, the numbers were changing. German officers began noticing a strange inconsistency in casualty reports. Entire American units that should have been wiped out were returning to combat within days. Soldiers who had lost liters of blood were walking again. Haas dismissed the rumors as propaganda, until one morning his unit captured a wounded American lieutenant near Clairvaux. The man was pale but alive, a crimson stain spreading across his abdomen. When Haas examined him, he found something that did not belong on any battlefield. He knew a small, flexible pouch, still warm to the touch, connected to the soldier's vein by a thin rubber tube. He held it up to the light, curious. It was not glass. It did not freeze. The liquid inside shimmered, dark and alive. Haas frowned. "What is this?" he asked through the interpreter. The prisoner whispered, "Blood bag." Haas laughed. "Impossible," he said. "This is not medicine. This is madness." Later in his report, he described it as a crude field device of unknown origin composed of rubber material, evidently for liquid containment. He concluded it was a failure of discipline, another example of American improvisation, dangerous and unscientific. The enemy replaces science with guesswork, he wrote. Their desperation grows visible. That night, as snow hammered the tents, Haas recorded one last entry before sleep. "They are bleeding faster than we are. It will end soon." He closed his notebook and blew out the lamp, unaware that within 90 days that same crude device would save more American lives than any tank or aircraft in the entire European campaign. While German units celebrated small victories across the lines, the situation for the Allies was dire. The Battle of the Bulge had begun, catching entire divisions in chaos. Convoys burned on mountain roads. Aid stations ran out of supplies. In one hospital tent near Luxembourg, a young nurse named Lieutenant Clara Daniels wiped the frost from a broken bottle of donated blood and watched it crack open like glass candy. 12 soldiers had died that morning, not from wounds but from cold. She pressed her gloved hands against a dying man's chest, feeling the heartbeat fade under her fingers. "If we can't store life," she murmured, "we can't save it." Her words went unheard in the noise of artillery outside, but they would echo through the next 3 months like a prophecy. On the other side of the front, Captain Haas raised a toast to victory, confident the Americans had reached their limit. In his mind, the enemy's defeat was not a question of if, but when. After all, how could they win a war when their own blood turned solid in the snow? History would answer him soon enough. So if you still believe that wars are decided only by guns and generals, comment the number 7 below. And if you think sometimes a single mind, a nurse, an engineer, or a soldier can rewrite the rules of survival hit like right now. Because what happens next is the moment one woman refused to watch her men die, and in doing so, changed the very science of war. Snow fell like ashes over the hills of Luxembourg, turning the war into silence. Beneath the storm canvas of a field hospital, silence was the one thing no one trusted. Silence meant another heart had stopped. Lieutenant Clara Daniels hadn't slept for 30 hours. Her eyes were bloodshot, her uniform stiff with dried plasma and mud. The stench of diesel heaters mixed with the metallic smell of blood that had long since frozen on the floor. She moved from cot to cot, checking pulses that faded faster than the light from the kerosene lamps. 12 men were gone since dawn. None of them should have died. They hadn't been shot through the head or burned alive. They had simply bled out because there was no blood left to give. The last bottle of stored blood shattered at noon. It had been packed in glass sent from Paris and frozen solid on arrival. When Clara tried to thaw it near the heater, the glass cracked open like ice, spilling what little life it held across the dirt. She stared at the dark stain for a long time before realizing she was crying. Captain Lewis, the field surgeon, came up behind her. "That's the last of it." She nodded. He sighed. "Then we pick who gets morphine and who gets prayers." His tone wasn't cruel, it was exhaustion pretending to be humor. Outside, the ambulances kept coming, jeeps and half-tracks dragging bodies through snowbanks, medics yelling for stretchers. The Red Cross flags were crusted with soot. Inside, the medics worked with numb hands and hollow eyes. They poured coffee grounds into boiling water and called it soup. The blood transfusion bottles lined up like tombstones on the shelves, most empty, some cracked, all useless. At 27, Clara was the youngest nurse in the unit, and the only one still asking questions. She had studied biology at the University of Chicago before the war, trained in field surgery under Dr. Blaylock, but nothing had prepared her for this. She watched life drain from men faster than she could patch holes. She began keeping a notebook, not for records, but for questions no one wanted to ask. On the first page, she wrote, "If we can't preserve blood, we can't preserve soldiers." Every morning she boiled instruments in what little alcohol was left. Every evening she listened to men whisper the same word before dying cold. The cold was the real enemy. It froze the bottles, it froze the veins, it froze hope. In the rare hours when shell fire stopped, she could hear the ice forming on the canvas roof. Sometimes she thought she could hear it cracking the world in half. When reinforcements arrived in January, they brought food bandages and morphine, but said no blood. The glass containers kept breaking in transport. The Army's Medical Supply Command had issued an order: blood must be transported and stored above freezing temperatures, an impossible instruction on a front where even coffee froze in the cup. On the night of January 4th, a convoy of wounded men from Bastogne arrived. Their stretchers filled every corner of the tent. Clara and the medics moved like ghosts, whispering numbers instead of names. Blood pressure, pulse, heart rate all collapsing. At midnight, a young corporal grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Don't let me sleep, please." She tried to comfort him, but his body went still before she could answer. She closed his eyes and looked around the tent. Dozens more were waiting for help that wouldn't come. That was the moment something inside her broke not from despair but from defiance. She walked outside into the snow, away from the screaming and the smell of death. The night sky was black and silent, the moon veiled behind smoke. She stared at her own hands, red cracked, shaking. The rubber gloves she wore were torn from overuse. She pulled one off and turned it over in the dim light. The latex still held its shape, soft, flexible, unbroken by the cold. Inside the tent, the glass bottles gleamed like ice. Outside, the glove in her hand felt alive. A thought surfaced, simple, stupid, impossible. She whispered it aloud as if testing it on the air. Why do we keep blood in glass when our bodies keep it in skin? When she returned to the ward, Captain Lewis was stitching a soldier's leg. "You all right, Daniels?" he asked without looking up. "No," she said quietly. "But I think I know what to do." He gave her a tired smile. "Unless it comes with a transfusion, keep it to yourself." She didn't argue. She went to the supply table, grabbed a new pair of gloves, a syringe, and a length of tubing salvaged from an IV line. She laid them out like sacred objects. If she was wrong, it would kill someone. But if she was right, maybe it would save one. She filled the glove with saline testing for leaks. None. She sterilized it with alcohol, then connected the tube and watched it hold pressure perfectly. It could bend, it could stretch, and it wouldn't break when frozen. Her pulse raced. The next morning she showed it to the other nurses. "A blood bag," she said. They laughed. One of them called it a suicide balloon. Clara didn't care. She wasn't trying to invent anything. She was trying to stop watching men die. By evening, the wounded began arriving again. She looked at the glove in her hand, then at a young soldier unconscious on the table. She turned to Captain Lewis. "Sir, if we don't try this, he's gone." He hesitated. "You're going to kill him." She met his eyes. "He's already dying." That night she cut her own finger and watched the blood rise. For the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. So if you've ever thought courage means charging into battle with a rifle, comment 7 below. Because sometimes courage is standing in a freezing tent with nothing but a pair of gloves and believing they might hold life itself. The storm never stopped. It howled through the night, rattling the canvas walls like a creature clawing to get in. Inside the dim tent, Lieutenant Clara Daniels sat alone at a makeshift table, a piece of broken door balanced on ammo crates. Around her, the field hospital slept in uneasy silence, the kind of silence that follows exhaustion, not peace. The kerosene lamp flickered as she laid out her tools. A pair of surgical scissors, a rubber glove, a length of clear tubing, electrical tape stolen from the signal corps, and a small glass syringe. That was all she had and all she needed. Her hands trembled from fatigue and fear. "This is stupid," she whispered to herself, half laughing, half crying, completely stupid. But then she remembered the corporal who had begged her not to let him sleep, and the sound of his voice fading into stillness. The war had already taken too many men. If stupidity was the only thing left between them and death, she would gladly be the most foolish nurse in Europe. She filled the glove with water, first watching the fingers swell and stretch without bursting. The material flexed perfectly. Then she cut off one of the fingers and slid the clear tube inside, sealing it with layers of tape until it held pressure. The idea was brutally simple. create something the body wouldn't fight, something that could move with the cold that wouldn't crack when frozen. She replaced the water with saline solution, tied the glove off at the wrist, and held it up to the light. The liquid inside shimmered like life itself. Her first thought was to show Captain Lewis, but she stopped. He would confiscate it, call it reckless. No one would believe her until it worked. She needed to prove it. So she sterilized a needle, cleaned her own arm, and inserted the tube. Pain flared sharp and bright. She adjusted the flow, watching the saline drip into her vein, drop by drop. It worked. The glove bag didn't collapse or leak. Pressure held steady. She smiled through tears. "It works," she whispered. "It actually works." The lamp sputtered as she wrote in her notebook, "Flexible container test success. No rupture under pressure. Potential field transfusion viability confirmed." The handwriting shook, but the words were steady. She had just built the first working prototype of what future doctors would call a blood bag with no lab, no funding, no permission. When Captain Lewis found her an hour later, she was still awake, her arm bandaged, the glove filled with blood-red saline hanging from a metal hook. "What in God's name are you doing?" he asked. She hesitated, testing something. He stepped closer, saw the makeshift device, and his face hardened. "Daniels, if that's what I think it is, you're out of your mind." She met his stare. "Then let me be." The next morning, the snow turned to freezing rain. A transport truck arrived loaded with new casualties, 12 men from an infantry unit caught in mortar fire. The doctors worked in grim rhythm triage, pressure, morphine prayers. Clara watched one soldier, barely 20, gasping as the blood soaked through his bandages. A femoral artery wound. He had maybe 15 minutes. Lewis shook his head. "He won't make it." Clara looked at her glove. She could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. "Let me try," she said. The captain didn't answer. He just stared, weighing orders against desperation. Finally, he muttered, "He's already gone. Do what you want." Her hands moved on instinct. She drew blood from another soldier, filtered it through gauze, and filled the glove bag. She tied it off, lifted it above the wounded man, and connected the tube. The flow began slow, uncertain, then steady. The glove flexed with each heartbeat, its shape changing subtly as warmth spread through it. Minutes passed. The soldier's breathing evened. His skin, once gray, began to flush with faint color. The monitors crackled softly, pulse returning. Clara didn't move. She just stared, waiting for the disaster that never came. When she looked up, every eye in the tent was on her. The doctors stood frozen. No one spoke for a full minute. Then Lewis finally said, "Well, I'll be damned." He leaned over. The patient checked his vitals again and looked back at her. "He's stable." Word spread faster than orders. By evening, 2 more medics had tried to copy the design. By nightfall, 10. Each one cut from the same idea, rubber gloves, tape, tubing. They called it the Daniels bag. The name embarrassed her, but it stuck. Not everyone approved. A few officers saw the contraption and threatened disciplinary action. Unauthorized equipment modification, one of them barked. "You could be court-martialed for this." Clara didn't answer. She just kept working, replacing glass bottles with her crude, flexible pouches. Each one was lighter, safer, faster. They could be carried in pockets heated by body warmth and used on the move. Over the next week, the unit recorded survival rates unlike anything seen before. Out of 30 critical patients, 26 lived. A sergeant from Ohio who had lost 2 pints of blood was walking by the 4th day. A medic wrote in his diary, "These rubber bags are worth a battalion." Still, Clara kept no pride, only urgency. She knew how fragile her discovery was, how easily it could be dismissed or destroyed by bureaucracy. She wrote daily reports, drew diagrams, and sent copies with every supply convoy heading west. Some reached command, most were lost in the snow, but the idea moved faster than the paper. Within 2 weeks, other hospitals began reporting flexible transfusion devices of unknown origin. In February, a military photographer captured an image of a nurse holding one of the glove bags. The photograph appeared in an internal bulletin titled "Improvised Medical Solutions." No one mentioned Clara's name, but the image spread through the ranks like a rumor of hope. At night, when the fighting quieted, she would sit by the heater staring at the glow through the latex. Inside, blood pulsed slowly, alive, still warm. She thought of the men it had saved and the ones it hadn't. "It isn't invention," she murmured once to a fellow nurse. "It's survival trying to teach itself." Outside, artillery thundered in the distance, shaking the earth. Inside, under the low hum of the generator, the first blood bag swayed gently from its hook, catching the lamplight like a red lantern in the dark. If you believe that real genius doesn't wear medals or stand behind podiums, but sits in a freezing tent fighting the clock comment 7 below. And if you think sometimes the most important inventions are the ones no one planned to make hit like right now. Because history's next miracle started with nothing more than a pair of shaking hands and a stupid idea. By late January 1945, the snow that had once hidden the Ardennes now revealed its scars: burned forests, shattered tanks, and medical tents stretched across the hills like torn bandages. Inside one of those tents, Lieutenant Clara Daniels was no longer a nurse tending the wounded. She had become something else, an engineer of life, orchestrating a quiet revolution under canvas and smoke. The first prototype had been a rubber glove tied with tape. The second looked slightly better, a pouch made from 2 gloves sealed together, shaped by heat from a stove. By the 10th version, Clara had refined the design to a single oval chamber connected by narrow tubing. She no longer called it a glove. To her, it was a vessel, a skin for life. She recorded everything meticulously in her notebook: temperature readings, elasticity tests, and the results of every transfusion. The data looked impossible. At -5 degrees Celsius, glass bottles froze solid within an hour. The latex pouches stayed fluid for 6. When blood cooled inside them, it thickened but didn't clot, thanks to a trace of sodium citrate she'd begun adding after reading a forgotten medical pamphlet from 1916. That single chemical insight, sodium citrate binding calcium ions to prevent clotting, turned her field improvisation into a working medical system. "Keep it warm," she wrote in the margins, "but not too warm. Keep it moving like a pulse." Captain Lewis, who once called the invention madness, was now her reluctant assistant. Together they ran timed transfusions with a pocket watch, adjusting the height of the hanging pouch to control flow. The results were astonishingly stable. The pressure inside the latex expanded with temperature, maintaining a near constant drip rate, even when air pressure fluctuated, a primitive form of automatic regulation. Lewis finally admitted what everyone else had begun to realize. "This isn't luck," he said quietly one evening. "This is physics." When the Quartermaster Division visited to inspect equipment, Clara hid the pouches under blankets. Official regulations still required the use of glass, but word had already escaped. Medics from nearby regiments came to learn her method, sketching designs on ration boxes, copying her measurements, passing the blueprints from unit to unit. Within weeks, every field hospital in the Third Army was producing its own version. It wasn't pretty. Some were made from raincoats, others from medical tubing and condoms. One sergeant built an entire transfusion kit using bicycle valves, but they all worked. The principle was simple enough to spread without manuals, elegant enough to survive every modification. Flexibility saves life. The Army Medical Service began collecting reports. At first, the documents were treated as curiosities, field innovation, unverified. Then the numbers arrived. Survival rates for soldiers receiving transfusions from latex pouches were triple those using glass. The reason was straightforward but profound portability. Glass bottles were heavy, fragile, and required gravity-fed rigs. The latex pouches could be carried against the chest for warmth, rolled into packs, or hung from a rifle. A single medic could carry 20 units of blood instead of 4. A jeep could transport 200. Logistics officers called it an arithmetic miracle. Clara didn't care about the math. For her, it was the faces, the color returning to men's cheeks, the slow rise of a chest that had been still. In February, she was ordered to demonstrate the device for a group of officers at the 6th Army Medical Depot. They stood in a semicircle inside a drafty warehouse, their uniforms spotless, their skepticism louder than words. Clara spoke plainly. She described how glass froze, how latex expanded, how pressure equalized. Then she filled a pouch, pierced the tubing, and connected it to a patient's arm. The red fluid began to flow. The men leaned in fascinated. One major scribbled notes, another whispered, "Impossible." When the transfusion finished, the patient's pulse stabilized. The officers said nothing for several seconds. Then one of them asked, "Who authorized this design?" Clara hesitated. "No one, sir." He frowned. "Then it doesn't officially exist." She smiled faintly. "It exists enough to save lives." Her demonstration reports circulated quietly up the chain of command. By March, the Office of the Surgeon General had issued an internal memorandum recommending continued field evaluation of flexible blood storage containers. They didn't credit her name, only the unit number, but it didn't matter. Her invention had entered the bloodstream of the war itself. The science behind it was as elegant as it was accidental. The human heart exerts an average pressure of 120 millimeters of mercury, roughly 1/6 of an atmosphere. The latex pouch, when filled, expanded until internal pressure matched that of a living vein. It became a mechanical analog of the circulatory system, pumping life at the same rhythm nature intended. In field notes recovered after the war, an engineer at Aberdeen Proving Ground wrote, "Daniel's device demonstrates emergent regulation by elasticity, a perfect engineering response to biological need. It is as if the material understands life." While the laboratories analyzed equations, Clara continued her work in mud and blood. Her pouches weren't built to impress engineers. They were built to survive hell. She modified the design to include double seals for transport and improvised a labeling system using pencil marks on the latex. She learned how to bury pouches under snow to keep them from freezing, how to hang them under jeeps to use vibration as mixing motion, how to warm them under her own coat while riding in ambulances. By spring, her unit's supply records showed a 70% reduction in mortality from hemorrhage. A statistician called it statistically improbable. Clara called it finally working. The first official report acknowledging the breakthrough arrived too late to matter. Dated April 1945, it summarized the method under the bland title, "Flexible Portable Blood Storage for Field Use." No author, no credit, just a line at the bottom. Operational survival improvement observed. But in the tents and battlefields where it mattered, every medic already knew who had made it possible. They called her the Angel with rubber wings. And so a war built on steel, fire, and machinery was changed by something soft. A nurse's intuition, a material that bent instead of breaking. If you think war only advances through explosions, comment 7 below. Because sometimes progress arrives quietly in the shape of a small red pouch swaying under a lamp made by a woman who refused to let blood turn to ice. Between January and April 1945, the front lines of Europe shifted like a living wound trying to close. Towns burned, rivers froze, and men died faster than maps could be redrawn. Yet within that chaos, something unseen was spreading faster than gunfire, a quiet contagion of survival. What began as one nurse's improvised pouch in a frozen tent had become an invisible artery pulsing through the Allied army. In the beginning, it was rumor. The rubber bag works medics whispered over mess tins and cigarette smoke, "It doesn't break, it doesn't freeze." By February, the rumor had turned into doctrine. Field manuals were rewritten in pencil margins, "Use flexible containers when available." Commanders stopped asking who had invented it. They only wanted to know where to get more. Everywhere the Americans advanced, the strange latex pouches followed, hanging from trees, tank turrets, even rifles driven into the snow. Soldiers joked that the battlefield now bled backwards, that the blood that should have been lost found its way home. In Bastogne, a corporal shot through the chest woke up 2 days later, asking who had given him the warm blood. In the mountains near Trier, medics packed entire backpacks with folded pouches hiking through shell fire to reach the wounded. By March, the statistics defied every known model of wartime medicine. The Third Army's Medical Division recorded a 60% reduction in hemorrhage-related deaths. Over 20,000 soldiers who would have been counted as casualties were alive, walking, talking, writing letters home. Supply officers struggled to keep up. Rubber stocks originally meant for vehicle tires were diverted to produce what quartermasters now called portable transfusion units. The war that had consumed glass and steel now depended on something soft, elastic, and human. Captain Lewis wrote in his report to headquarters, "These devices allow transfusion under any condition, standing, running, even under fire. We no longer wait for safety, we carry it with us." That sentence reached the Surgeon General's desk within days. He underlined 3 words in red pencil, "We carry it." In the field, Clara Daniels barely noticed the magnitude of what she'd unleashed. She was too busy keeping the miracle alive. Her hands were raw from constant use of antiseptic, her voice nearly gone from shouting orders through the noise. She trained every medic who passed through her tent how to seal the latex, how to keep the blood warm, how to keep air out of the tube. She didn't care about recognition. She only cared that it worked. Her notebook filled with numbers and names, blood types, transfusion rates, survival intervals. She drew crude charts showing recovery curves, noting that men transfused within the first hour had triple the survival rate of those treated later. Those notes, smudged with fingerprints and blood, would one day serve as the foundation for modern emergency transfusion protocols. But at the time, they were just scribbles written between bombings. In 1 week alone, her unit performed over 400 transfusions. The tent lights glowed through the night like beacons, each red pouch swaying under the lamps, each one a pulse of defiance. The other nurses began to name them: angel bags, life skins, the warm hands. When asked why, one medic said, "Because they feel alive, like the war finally stopped taking and started giving." Enemy intelligence noticed. German field reports from March described an alarming trend: American soldiers surviving catastrophic blood loss. Their medical units possess unknown liquid preservation containers. One officer concluded, "The Americans have found a way to stop dying." That line circulated among Allied troops as a badge of pride. Some painted it on their helmets. Others whispered it before missions, half as prayer, half as taunt. In early March, Clara's hospital moved into a captured monastery near Koblenz. The stone walls still smelled of smoke, but the halls were dry and wide enough to set up a proper transfusion ward. There she performed the most ambitious test, yet simultaneous transfusions on 4 patients using different bag designs. The results were identical. All survived. A war correspondent who visited the monastery described the scene in his notebook: rows of soldiers, pale but breathing, hooked to what looked like balloons of blood. The nurse in charge works with the calm of someone who has already seen death and told it to wait. The photograph he took that day would later appear in Stars and Stripes with the caption, "New Life for the Wounded." It showed Clara, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, standing beneath a rack of translucent red pouches. The image went viral decades before the word existed. Soldiers mailed it home to their families. Wives pinned it to kitchen walls. Children pointed to it and asked, "Is that how they live again?" Behind the calm face in that photo, Clara was exhausted. She hadn't left the front in months. The noise of artillery had become part of her heartbeat. She sometimes dreamed in red flashes of light liquid and the rhythmic drip of blood into veins. She kept working because stopping meant hearing the silence again, the silence that had once filled the tent when the glass bottles shattered. On April 12th, a general from the medical corps arrived unannounced. He toured the facility, asked a few technical questions, then left a single typed note on her desk. Effective immediately, your transfusion method is to be adopted across all field hospitals in Europe. You have 72 hours to train new units, no signature required. She folded the paper and put it in her pocket. It wasn't approval, but it was enough. That night, as rain hammered the roof, she stood by the rows of cots and watched the pouches sway. In the rhythmic light, they looked like hearts beating in the air. She whispered, "Stay alive," to no one in particular, and the wind carried it through the ward. Outside, victory was near. Inside, it already existed in every soldier breathing against the odds. When the war in Europe ended weeks later, Clara received a simple telegram. Mission accomplished. Mortality reduced beyond expectation. Your contribution noted. No medals, no ceremony, no headlines. But in the field hospitals across France, Germany, and Belgium, tens of thousands of soldiers were alive to see peace. And somewhere in a pile of discarded medical supplies, an empty latex pouch lay forgotten. It had done its work. So if you've ever believed miracles belong to churches or laboratories, comment 7 below. Because sometimes the miracle is just a nurse in a ruined monastery holding a piece of rubber to the light and proving that life can fight back. The war ended not with a bang for Clara Daniels, but with a silence so deep it felt unnatural. After months of constant noise engines, shells screaming, the sudden stillness of peacetime was almost unbearable. The field hospital near Koblenz emptied slowly, one patient at a time. The last soldier she treated, a boy from Wisconsin, left, walking on his own, his veins still carrying the blood she had saved him with. He saluted her awkwardly before boarding the truck. "Ma'am," he said, "I heard you're the one who made these." He pointed at the latex pouch dangling from his IV line. "You should get a medal or something." She smiled faintly. "You already gave it to me," she said. "You're alive." 3 weeks later, her unit was disbanded. The war moved on without her. Paperwork followed her instead. Demobilization forms, medical inventories, and one final line typed at the bottom of her service record: Nurse Daniels' field performance, exemplary. Improvised transfusion equipment contributed to notable survival improvements. Recognition pending. Pending turned into forgotten. In 1946, a group of Army scientists presented a new medical device to the Surgeon General's office. It looked eerily familiar, flexible, translucent, capable of holding blood for days. They called it the PL-146 field container. The official report described it as a recent innovation developed through coordinated laboratory research. No mention of tense mud or a woman who'd tested it on herself by candlelight. The name Clara Daniels appeared nowhere. She went home to Kansas that summer, back to a small town where no one spoke of war except in whispers. Her parents' farmhouse sat between fields of corn and wheat, and for the first time in years, the only sound she heard at night was the wind. She took a job as a nurse at a rural clinic, patching up farmers who'd lost fingers to machinery and children burned by kitchen stoves. None of them knew she had once rewritten battlefield medicine. Every morning she passed a newspaper rack filled with headlines about heroes, generals, scientists, inventors. She never looked at them for long. When one of her patients mentioned a newsreel showing the new blood bags that saved our boys, she only nodded. Yes, she said softly, they did. She kept her wartime notebook hidden in a drawer beside her bed. Inside, the pages were stiff with age, smudged with dirt and blood. On the first page, she had written in shaky pencil, "If we can't store life, we can't save it." Sometimes, on quiet nights, she reread those words and wondered how something born in desperation could vanish so completely in peace. In 1950, a medical conference in Washington honored the inventors of flexible transfusion storage technology. The attendees were men in suits and ties. Their presentation slides showed laboratory diagrams, sterile glassware, clean metal tables, no mud, no fear, no war. When the applause came, no one clapped for her. She was 3,000 miles away, treating a pneumonia patient in a clinic that smelled of iodine and rain. A journalist once tracked her down after hearing rumors that some nurse had pioneered the blood bag at the front. He found her sitting on the clinic steps wearing a plain cardigan and holding a thermos of coffee. He asked if the stories were true. She hesitated, then smiled gently. "I wasn't trying to invent anything," she said. "I was just trying to stop them from dying." The journalist wrote her words in his notebook, but never published the article. There was no space for small miracles in the headlines of a rebuilding world. The years passed quietly. The latex pouches evolved into plastic. The designs refined, the patents filed. The world moved on. But in every hospital, every ambulance, every transfusion that kept someone alive there was an echo of that cold night in 1945. The sound of a nurse tearing open a glove, taping a tube, and refusing to give up. When Clara Daniels died in 1973, the local paper ran a 2-sentence obituary. Retired nurse, age 55, served with distinction in World War II. Survived by no immediate family. There was no mention of the invention that had changed medicine. The Army's archives stored her reports under miscellaneous field adaptations. Her name remained buried in boxes of dust and silence. But her work never stopped living. Every day, somewhere in the world, a bag of blood swings gently from a hook, its contents warm its pulse steady. No one asks who made it possible. They don't have to. The answer is in the motion itself, the quiet drip that turns death into delay, despair into survival. And maybe that's enough. Maybe legacy isn't about being remembered. Maybe it's about creating something that keeps others alive long after you're gone. So if you believe that history forgets the wrong people, comment 7 below. Because while nations build statues for warriors, sometimes the truest hero is the one who built something soft enough to hold life and strong enough to outlast war. In 1951, 6 years after the guns fell silent, a letter arrived at the U.S. Army Medical Archives from an unexpected address, Munich, West Germany. It was handwritten in careful English by a man named Captain Dieter Haas, the same Wehrmacht medical officer who had once watched American soldiers die in the snow and called it proof of superiority. His letter began with the words, "To the officers of the United States Army Medical Corps, I write not as an enemy, but as a physician who once served the wrong master." Haas's handwriting was elegant but heavy, as if burdened by memory. He confessed that during the winter of 1944, he had written in his field journal that the Americans were doomed, that their blood would freeze before it reached their wounded. But in the months that followed, he saw something that broke every rule of war he had believed in. At first, he wrote, "We could not understand why your soldiers stopped dying. Their trucks carried no glass bottles. Their hospitals carried no equipment we recognized. Yet men who should have perished were walking again. It was as if they had found a way to keep life warm." He recalled finding the body of an American medic outside Bitburg that March. Among the man's possessions was a small, flexible pouch still half full of blood, sealed with tape and tubing. Haas took it, studied it, and felt the weight of irony settle in his chest. "I realized to my shame that our war for domination had been lost, not to better weapons, but to better mercy. While we built machines to take life faster, someone among you had built one to give it back." Haas explained how he tried to report the discovery to his superiors, but the war was collapsing too quickly. Berlin never answered. The files vanished in retreat, but the image stayed with him, the red pouch that moved when he touched it, as if still alive. In that moment, he wrote, "I understood that we were not fighting an army of machines, but of minds. And somewhere behind those minds, there must have been a woman." He ended his letter with a single sentence that read more like a confession than a statement. "They won because they learned to save life faster than we learned to take it." The letter was archived, untranslated, and forgotten for decades. It was rediscovered in 1982 by a military historian cataloging post-war correspondence. He included one excerpt in a journal footnote under the title, "Unattributed Reflection, German Medical Officer." The note never mentioned Clara Daniels because her name too had vanished from the records. Today in the U.S. Army Medical Museum at Fort Sam Houston, behind a glass case marked Field Innovations 1944. 1945 hangs a single object, a small discolored latex pouch taped and creased with age. The label beneath it reads simply, "Field Blood Container, Origin Unknown." Visitors pass by without stopping. The light above the display flickers softly, casting a faint red hue on the faded rubber. It still holds its shape. If Captain Haas were alive to see it, he might have smiled not in pride, but in peace, because the truth of war he had learned wasn't written in victories or defeats. It was written in the moments when humanity refused to disappear. And perhaps that is how Clara Daniels will always exist, not as a name, but as a pulse hidden in every drop of blood that still finds its way home. So if you've stayed through this story, if you believe history's real heroes are the ones who never asked for glory, comment 7 below. Because remembrance isn't carved in stone, it's carried quietly in veins, in memory, and in every life saved by someone the world forgot.